August 13, 1972. A heavily guarded prisoner of war camp in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. That night was about to make history. This was the same camp where 12 Indian Air Force pilots were held captive after the 1971 India-Pakistan War. The security was so intense that escaping alive seemed impossible. Towering walls, barbed wire on top, armed Pakistani soldiers everywhere. But inside this impossible place were 3 Indian pilots who refused to be scared of any wall, wire, or gun. They escaped in such a way that the Pakistanis were left stunned. Let's rewind to December 3, 1971. India and Pakistan were locked in a fierce war. On the ground, the Indian army was pushing Pakistan back on every front, but the skies told a different story. A high watchtower near Pakistan's Zafarwal city had become a major headache for the Indian Air Force. Pakistani troops used it to track Indian movements and even fire accurately at Indian aircraft. The mission to destroy this tower was given to a fearless IAF pilot, Dilip Parokar. Known for his courage, discipline, and grit, he knew the mission wasn't easy. But for the country, the risk was essential. On December 10, 1971, Parokar took off in his Sukhoi fighter jet. As he neared the watchtower, Pakistani anti-aircraft guns opened heavy fire. Bullets raced toward his jet. Within moments, his aircraft was badly damaged. Seeing the situation worsen, Parokar ejected without wasting a second. He survived, but fate dropped him right into enemy territory. He was already injured during landing, fighting through pain, when local Pakistani civilians began gathering around. The crowd started shouting, "Enemy! Enemy!" Within moments, they began beating him, snatching his belongings. Exhausted, injured, and beaten, Parokar lost consciousness. A few more minutes and the mob might have killed him. But then Pakistani soldiers arrived, pushing the crowd back, saying, "He's more useful to us alive." And so Parokar was taken into custody. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a dark, cramped, damp cell. A Pakistani officer stood before him, pushing forward paper and a pencil, demanding, "Draw a map of Adampur Air Base." Adampur Air Base was a crucial Indian Air Force installation. Parokar refused. Then began the torture. Finally, under immense pressure, Parokar drew the map. The officer was delighted until he returned in a rage. Parokar hadn't drawn Adampur Air Base, he'd drawn Mumbai Airport instead. Furious, the officer sentenced him to stand in a corner of the cell all night, with orders that if he sat down, the guard would shoot. Parokar stood all night, his body failing. But the guard took pity, whispering, "Sit till morning. If someone comes, I'll give a signal, then stand." Parokar spent many nights in that dark cell, enduring continuous torture but never breaking. Eventually, even the Pakistanis gave up and moved him to a common camp with other Indian prisoners, the Rawalpindi POW camp, where 12 IAF pilots were held. There, Parokar learned that all had suffered similarly, but none had lost their spirit. The camp commandant, Usman Hamid, treated the Indian pilots with respect, much to the anger of other Pakistani officers. Hamid had given them a cassette player and an atlas, a small help that would later write a huge story. On December 25, 1971, news arrived Pakistan had surrendered in Dhaka. India had won the war. 93,000 Pakistani soldiers were in Indian custody. The camp erupted in joy. Everyone thought they'd be home soon. But Parokar felt otherwise. He knew prisoner exchanges could take years. He told his comrades, "If we wait, we might be here for ages. Why not find our own way?" Initially, no one agreed. But Parokar wasn't one to give up. A seed had been planted in his mind, a seed of freedom that would grow into a plan to shake the walls of Rawalpindi. After December 25, 1971, an eerie silence settled over the Rawalpindi POW camp. Outside, the war was over, but for these 12 pilots, the fight continued. Days turned into weeks with no news of exchange. Parokar felt deep down that government talks could drag on. He refused to just wait. Freedom, for him, meant breaking out on his own. Early on, he thought of a plan: snatch a guard's gun during a nighttime toilet trip and use him as a shield. But it was too risky, and he dropped it. Months passed, with no movement from the Indian side. Despair grew. Then Parokar spoke to his comrades again. This time, two stepped forward: Miss Grewal and Harish Singh. The three decided that if fate gave them a chance, they'd take it. Now the real planning began. They studied the atlas given by Usman Hamid, night after night, memorizing routes and possibilities. The plan was clear: heading straight to the India-Pakistan border was too dangerous, security was extreme after the war. So they decided to head toward Afghanistan first, then somehow reach India. Next, choose the right cell. They needed one closest to the outer wall, with minimal guard movement. After careful observation, they targeted cell number 4. But shifting there wasn't easy. Parokar's good conduct with the guards, he had built small reports over time, helped.